Hello and welcome to Book Passage virtually. My name is Allison Bainbridge, and I have the privilege of introducing a conversation centered around a book that I found to be delightful, irreverent, and yes, relatable. The Three of Us by Ore Agbaje-Williams. As I read this book, I was saying to the author before we went live that I felt like I was watching a play. The dialogue and the interplay engages the reader immediately. And I know so often we get in a little bit of a reading slump where perhaps we are overwhelmed by what's going on outside us and it's hard to focus. This book is the perfect book to get you out of that reading slump. You can just get in it right away. It's a gem. It's just delightful. What if your two favorite people hated each other with a passion? Long-standing tensions between a wife found her best friend finally come to a break and her best friend finally come to a breaking point in this sharp domestic comedy of manners told brilliantly over the course of one day. It's told in three tout mesmerizing parts: the wife, the husband, the best friend, over the course of one day. The Three of Us is a subversively comical, widely astute, and painfully compulsive triptych of domestic life that explores cultural truths, what it means to defy them, and the fine line between compromise and betrayal when it comes to ourselves and the people we're meant to love. Ore Agbaje-Williams is a British Nigerian writer and a book editor from London. The Three of Us is her first novel, and we hope not her last, of course. We're also so fortunate to have Robert Jones Jr. as Ore's in conversation partner. He's the author of the New York Times best-selling novel, The Prophets, which won multiple awards. His writings have been featured in many publications, including the New York Times, Essence, as well as the critically acclaimed anthologies 400 Souls and the 1619 Project. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Ore and Robert, and please give them a warm virtual welcome.
Thank you
Alright.
so much. Ore, it is so good to see you. I am so excited to talk about this book because you already know how much I adored it. It was just, I remember the night that I started reading it and I could not put it down because I was just so wrapped up in it. It was almost like I was sitting in on three people's therapy sessions and I was not supposed to be, but like I couldn't help myself but to eavesdrop. It's just so well written. And it's so what it captures so well is the deep inner psychologies of human beings. It's just so smart in that way. In fact, I want to read a couple of things that have been said about your book. Publishers Weekly called it an intoxicating debut. It's delicious. Book Page said the Three of Us makes for a quick and thought provoking read that can elicit a cringe 1 minute and rueful laughter the next. Real Simple called it clever. Booklist called it wonderfully witty. Library Journal said rich, raw, hilarious. The Washington Post said deliciously wicked, crafty, with such sly wit. And of course, here's what I said. You know, I had to go all the way in. Ore Agbaje Williams's The Three of Us is explosive not because of the arguments, the betrayals, the passive aggression, or the enmities. Those are all exquisite. But what rocked me was the naked examination of that coveted construct we call innocence. How very few people actually are, especially the ones who believe that that's all they can be, how easily it's weaponized and made indistinguishable from guilt, and how the people who are honest about this are the only ones with a real chance at wellness and wholeness. The Three of Us read, wrote, and erased me. Then it gave me back to myself, giggling and nodding my head. What a keen mind this story comes from. What a calm power this story holds. And goodness gracious, that ending. Would you do us the honor of reading a short passage from it so that everyone else can know what I'm talking about?
Yes. And I just have to say, that is one of the most insane quotes I've ever received or read, not even just for my book, but even as an editor. I've never seen anything like that. So when I got it, I was literally floored. I couldn't believe myself. So thank you, Robert. And thank you
You're
for
very
being
welcome.
Also, if I read too quickly, forgive me. I talk very fast and I'm learning to try and be slower. So I'm just going to read from the beginning of the third section, which is from the best friend, Temmie. Look, all good things come to an end. Good films, good food, good clothes, good books, good friendships, below average marriages. Whilst to some I may be desecrating the sanctity of marriage, though I doubt the sanctity of marriage still exists, because I mean, look at the divorce rates, I truly believe that at the end of all this, both my friend and her husband will be happier. He will see that the woman he married is simply an apparition of the person she thought she had to become, and she will see that the life we planned for ourselves is truly the one she wants. This man, my friend, this marriage was never going to last. Ultimately, I think she knows that. I think that maybe she's been waiting all this time for me to save her again, like I did that day in the changing room at school, but I think she sat too comfortably on the periphery for longer than is fair. Here is the abridged version. I grew up with a lot of money and have been accustomed to a specific kind of lifestyle ever since. The first time I rolled my eyes at my father, I was 6, and he told me I reminded him of his sister, who was divorced and alone. When I was 7, my mother started making me get plates of food for my father at family gatherings. Finally, I asked if he had broken his legs, and she asked me if she had heard me correctly before pinching the back of my neck and telling me that I should be grateful that we were in a public place. I decided unfiltered honesty was the best policy when I turned 11. I have disliked overtly strong scents since a boy who appeared to bathe in Lynx body spray asked for my number at school dance. I firmly believe this: if someone is telling a funny story and it takes longer than 15 seconds for the setup, the punchline is unlikely to be worth waiting for. Ever since I was moved up a year in school, I have had an unwavering belief in my superiority. I can only live in homes with at least 2 full bathrooms. I haven't flown economy since I was 10 years old. Once, a man at a bar told me I looked like the mother of his children, so I registered him as a sex offender online. When we were 16, my friend, sorry, I'm just getting over laughing. When we were 16, my friend and I used her older sister's IDs to get tattoos at a parlor next door to where my oldest brother got his haircut. He gave us a lift and paid for the tattoos because I found condoms in his coat pocket and used them as leverage to strike up a beneficial deal. The tattoos are of our initials. Hers is a T, barely half a millimeter in size, behind her ear. I believe that anyone who claims to have more than one best friend is a pathological liar. I also believe that women who call their husbands or partners their best friends or better halves should be imprisoned. I can list all my friends on 2 fingers, my friend and my sister-in-law. The latter has a poor alcohol tolerance but is happy to spend her husband's money, so our shopping trips are enjoyable. She has since moved to Nigeria, though, and no shopping trip is worth that long a flight. I truly believe that if I decided to, I could make anyone like me. I have a talent for getting people to believe anything I say. I have read numerous highly regarded journals that have gathered scientific data to prove that men are evidence of an anatomical mistake, except for you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm giggling to myself again because I remember encountering Temmie and reading that and thinking, oh my gosh, this is hilarious at 3 o'clock in the morning. Um, but I'm very, very curious about the mind out of which this springs. Um, when did you first realize you were a writer? What was the first thing you wrote that you were proud of? And do you still have it?
Ooh. Um, when did I know I was a writer? I'm not sure because I think I didn't know if I was a writer in terms of putting the ideas down or just holding them in my head, like having ideas. I think I knew I was a storyteller when I was really, really young. Because my older sister and I, we used to, in our old house, our rooms were next door to each other. So at night, she would leave her door open, I would leave my door open, and I'd make up stories, like to get us to go to sleep, basically. And I think probably then I knew I was a bit of a storyteller. And then also we had this airing cupboard in the back of my room, and my sister and I would like go into it and come out and pretend that we were from a different time, like use it as a time machine. And I think then I knew I had a kind of imagination. But I think maybe the first thing I wrote that I was really proud of was probably a poem, actually. And it's called Be, and I can't remember the whole thing, but it's super short. But I think it's something along the lines of what could we be but falls in love, and then I think the ending is kind of a repetition of that line. What could we be, our very own fantasies, or something like that. And I think even now to this day, I'm like, that's maybe the one and only good poem I've ever written in my life. I'm proud of it. But I never also, I don't think poetry is my future. I think that takes a specific kind of skill. But yeah, I think probably storytelling started from when I was younger and my sister and I had our doors open. That was like the genesis of that storytelling journey.
It's amazing to me how many writers say that their journey to becoming a writer or realizing their talent as writers begins in childhood with storytelling, and the ways in which we are so open to like magic and fantasy as children that we could create those sorts of things. And so many of us don't carry that into adulthood because the world tells us no, but I always think writers are courageous because despite those no's, they continue.
Yeah.
So thank you for continuing. Um, could you tell us a bit about what your publishing journey to the three of us was like? And can we talk about our editor, Sally
Yeah.
Kim,
Yes.
as well as like the entire PR marketing team of Putnam, which is absolutely extraordinary. Um, you hear such horror stories about being a person of color or a writer of color in the publishing industry, but I have to say that Putnam is the exception. They constantly checked in. They were concerned about me as a human being. And I know that's such a low bar, given that it's such a high bar, given what we know about with the industry. But could you talk to me about your publishing journey, how you met Sally, what your relationship with Sally was in crafting this novel, and your entire experience on your tour thus far?
I think the first most important thing is that I knew of Sally before Sally knew of me, and I think a lot of people know of Sally before Sally knows of them, because well, she's just amazing and she's got an incredible reputation. And the thing is, though, her reputation isn't just about her professionalism; it's also about who she is as a person. And it was so important to me across my agent and my UK editor and my UK publisher, and the whole team I work with. I want to make sure I'm working with people who aren't just nice to me because, we're doing this thing together, but people who are nice to everybody, who are kind to everybody, who care about everybody. And I definitely found that not just in Sally, but in the whole team. And the first time I got to speak to Sally was on a Zoom call when we were doing the sort of whole process of like the auction and stuff for the book. And the thing I love that she didn't come with any like pretense or pomp. She was just I think we bonded over the fact that we both had these bookshelves, actually, although I was in my room at the time. And I think we talked about our IKEA bookshelves and how I think maybe how basic we were for having them or something like that. But the conversation just flowed and I felt so comfortable and at ease with her. And everything she was saying about the book was almost like she'd gone into my head and downloaded everything I thought, and she was just saying it out loud. And I think we came off that call, my agent and I came off that call, we were just like, we didn't even say anything, we were just nodding at each other like, yeah, that's the one. And the whole process of even editorially, I think this is one of my favorite stories of editing, is that the first round of editorial notes I got from my UK editor, and suddenly she'd written her notes out, and then at the end she was like, and just one more thing, she's like, I'm not sure if this is on purpose or if this is like a gag, but they currently drink 13 bottles of wine and 1 bottle of whiskey. She was like, I've just written down like where it all is. She wasn't even forceful. She wasn't like, you must take this out. She was just like, I'm just gonna check. I just like, another every day in the wine. And she had very astutely pointed out that was probably not physically possible in like the nicest way. And honestly, that's just been reminiscent of my whole journey. From the beginning, I've never felt uncomfortable. I've never felt like I've been pressured into doing anything. Every time Katie or anybody from the publicity team sends me, they're like, oh, here are some new hits. I'm like, how did you guys do this? Like, what did you bribe them with? And they're like, oh, it's you. And I'm like, no, but it's you, honestly. And also, I think something that I love about the whole team is their infectious energy. I feel very legitimately, honestly, that they're excited about the book and they're excited about everything that's to do with it. And, I've worked in publishing before. It's hard to be excited all the time because there's a lot going on. And I know that they have probably 20 other books they're working on at the same time. They all want the books to achieve really great things. But just to see the level of effort and time and care, and that cover was the first cover they sent to me, and I was like, this is perfection immediately. I think I was at like a concert and it came up on my phone. I was like, oh, I stopped. I was like, oh, guys, look. I was with my best friend Grace and my housemate Christina. And I was like, guys, stop, look. Um, it's been a dream of a journey, honestly. From everything from editorial and even like to Sally's assistant Tarini, who's just so fantastic and so lovely, and even I can like tell her excitement and just genuine care. Even though I made so many changes, like to the acknowledgements really late in the day, she was so kind about it. And yeah, everyone from editorial to marketing, publicity, everything has just been just incredible. And I think because also I've got to publish, I know how rare it is to find a team that's so like that. But the thing that she actually mentioned in our call, she mentioned you. I don't know if I told you this before, but she said, one of the things that Robert said when we were talking to him is that he loved that we all seemed to really love each other and that we felt like a family. And when she said that, I was like, that is the team that I want. That's the team that I really want to be part of. And I felt that honestly every step of the way. When I met Sally last March, actually, I think, when she was being honored as editor of the year, because she's amazing. And I met some of the team there and they were fantastic. And then I got to meet everyone in December when I got to meet you as well. And they're just fantastic. Anyone who's not published by Partner, I'm so sorry, because they're just the best.
The synergy between them, editorial, PR, marketing, it is just phenomenal. I've never experienced that level of excellence in
Yeah.
any organization. So I was very thankful, and I'm so glad that we are now siblings because of Sally. And how is your tour going? How has it been?
Oh yes,
so
sorry,
far?
you did ask that question as well. It's been really good. It's been lovely. This is my second US event. And hopefully we'll do some more. But it's been really nice just to, I was saying to you earlier, like to connect with readers and to have people come up and say, like, I read your book and I really loved it, or like you inspired me to write. And I was saying earlier, like to have the representation of you and I is just, I think is amazing for them. And I think, on the one sense, that's why I want to write. I want to inspire particularly other Black women to write. And I think to be in this position to do that is fantastic. And to be given the opportunity, like by organizations and bookshops like Book Passage, to be able to do this is just incredible. And I don't take a single second of it for granted. I feel sorry for people who have to listen to my voice constantly, but I'm grateful that they do it anyway.
Will you be coming to the United States in person? Something?
Yeah, I'm hoping to maybe in July.
Oh, that's fantastic. Glad to hear that. Okay, let's get into the three of us. This book is so scandalous and revealing in terms of both the superficial and the deep down relationships between people. Where does this story come from? Where do these characters come from? Is there a particular question you wanted to answer in writing this book?
Ooh, okay. I'll start with the last question first, because a writer friend of mine, he asked me a similar-ish question, although he asked it more specifically, and I didn't have an answer for him. And I said, that's up to the reader. I recently spoke to another writer, Diana Evans, and she said something beautiful. She said that I think readers complete the books. You give the reader the book, and then they take it, and then they decide sort of how it ends. They decide what to take from it. So I didn't have anything in mind. The whole thing that I wanted to capture though was, and I don't know if this is the experience everyone's had, was joy. I really enjoyed writing the book, and I want to entertain. I think that the thing that I may be good at is hopefully bringing joy and helping people to be positive. And I know that the book is not necessarily full of positives. I wanted something, like you said, something a little bit scandalous and just like a bit of fun, and something just like short and enjoyable, but you might be like, oh my gosh, what the heck, but like in a good way. Some people have messaged me and finished like, I'm not even sure what I've just read, and I'm like, that's great. But the idea for the book itself came from a conversation I had with Grace, my best friend, who the book is dedicated to. And at the time I was seeing someone, and so I was saying to her, oh, I really like him, and all this kind of stuff. And she was like, this is funny because this is maybe one of the meanest things she's ever said. Well, not mean, but maybe slightly toxic, given that she's one of the nicest people in the world. She said, oh, now you're going to get a boyfriend. I'm never going to see you, and you're going to take all your time with him. And I was like, no, Grace, he has to understand that you come first, which I was mostly being serious about. It was like half joke. Because everybody knows that Grace and I, like, we're joined at the hip. She's like my extra limb. And so then it got me thinking, like, oh, wait a second, what would that be like if there was a real situation whereby, you know, someone got together with somebody else and then the partner didn't like them or the best friend didn't like them? Like, what would that be like? And so I started thinking about that, and then the idea came. And in terms of where the characters came from, I think they're an amalgamation of, this is going to sound bad, my friends and I, but also things I've loved and watched. Like, I love rich, messy people. I love stuff like Succession, God rest its soul, and The White Lotus. I'd like The White Lotus. And I love also like Bel Air in terms of, and also obviously it's originated Fresh Prince, specifically because it's depicting wealthy people, like Black wealthy people. And I thought, you see that, you get that in the US, but you don't necessarily have a lot of it in the UK. There is now a new show called Riches, I think, is depicting something like that.
I saw that on Amazon.
Yeah. So, but I was like, I really want to kind of explore it here and see what that's like, and just have people who they have essentially everything they could ever need, but they're still making problems for themselves, which is what we call rich people problems. And I really wanted to explore that and see what that was like. And so I kind of mixed together. I think when I say it's a mixture of my friends, it's the way we speak, like how we talk about men we're dating or whoever we're dating, or, you know, how we make fun of people in a very kind way. I kind of infused all of that into them, and I wanted them to feel like real characters. And I think that's where my UK editor Jaker and Sally really helped, because I think the husband and the wife, the husband and the best friend Temmie, were a little bit flatter when we first got the book, and they really helped me to bring them out more and say, okay, who are these people? What do they want? What do they like? That kind of thing, and that made them feel like real people. And it's funny because, which is a kind of a pun, people have said to me that they find the husband section the funniest. And I thought, I was like, that's great, but I worked really hard to make Temmie's section super funny. But I'm glad regardless. But yeah, that's kind of where it all came from. And it's just, I just love that these characters seem so real to people, that they have very visceral opinions of them. And I really enjoyed that and getting that kind of feedback.
Of the people that I spoke to about your book who have read it, everyone says they know somebody like one of those three characters. It's them or their friends or their relatives or whomever. So you did a really, really good job of giving those characters their dimensionality.
Thank you.
And I have a question about a very interesting stylistic choice you made. Temmie is the only named character. Why?
So first of all, I couldn't think of names for the husband and the wife, none that fit anyway. And that was maybe within the first like 10,000 words of me writing the wife section. And then I thought to myself, actually, do you know what? They don't need names, because they see themselves, or they see each other as their roles. Even as it refers to Temmie, you know, the husband refers to Temmie by her name, but he mostly refers to the wife as my wife, and she refers to her husband as my husband. To Temmie, it's her husband. She wants to put a point of difference between them, and it's my friend. So it's someone, again, it's all about this sort of ownership that they seem to have of each other, or a distance that they want to put between one another. And I thought the husband and the wife really see being married as, you know, like the pinnacle of their lives. Like, this is the big thing, and once we've achieved this status. And they see each other as those roles. So I thought it makes perfect sense if they just refer to themselves that way and they have no other sort of names or identities, because those identities have been erased to the two of them since they've become this one unit.
Temmie is my favorite character in the book.
Oh.
Because she's so messy, but she knows she's messy and
Yeah.
she owns it. Like, she to me, she's the character in the book with complete clarity. Do you have a favorite character?
No, because it's like asking someone if they have a favorite child. It's impossible.
Which of the characters need more of your attention than the others?
Oh, Temmie, she definitely needed more of my attention than the others. I think because for a long time I was, and this is something that Sally and Jacob said actually, that I was becoming a little bit repetitive with the things that I was making her say, like, oh, I hate the husband, oh, I hate this about my friend, da, 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 that kind of thing. They were like, she needs to have something more to her, like, what's her backstory, what's her, if you were to call her a villain, what's her villain origin story, kind of thing. And so she definitely required a bit more attention to make her feel like a real person, not just a reflection of the opposites of each of those two other people in the book.
There's so much I want to say about the book that I can't because they lead to spoilers. But I have to say, one of the greatest endings in all of literature, like pitch perfect ending. Like, oh, I just, I, I don't know how you struck that balance of giving us enough but want more. Like it was just the perfect ending. How did you do that?
I have to give full credit on that to my agent, because the ending was very different when I first wrote the book. And when I think about it now, I think of how embarrassing it would have been if I really tried to put that out there with that ending. Because it was a non-ending. It was lackluster. It didn't give any kind of anything. And she was like, I feel like this is not the ending that it needs to have. And she didn't say, oh, you have to write this specific thing, but she said, could you pull on some of these strings a bit more? Like there was this conversation about this thing, which I won't mention because again, a spoiler. And she was like, can you pull on this string a little bit more? Could you make something more out of that? And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I sat down and I was like, wait a minute, she's onto something here. And then Sally and Jacob really helped me to build the tension. It's funny because at the time, when they were saying stuff like, oh, can you build the tension? I was like, no, I don't know how to build the tension. It is what it is. But then they were really good. They helped me to actually very painstakingly point out specific parts of it where I could, pull out the tension more and amp things up a little bit more. And I think I was so worried about it feeling a bit like a soap opera. But people have said that it feels like it's bubbling all along, and it doesn't feel like because it just feels like it's bubbling, and then it does what it does. So yeah, I think I have to give full credit to the ending to my agent, because she's the one who said this current ending is not working, but she said it in a nice way. And she said, I think there's something more we can do here. But I honestly think though, and I was going to say not to toot my own horn. I will toot my own horn because that's okay. I love actually that last paragraph. That last paragraph is maybe one of the favorite things I've ever written, alongside that poem that I wrote ages ago.
The ending is so explosive. Like it's just like it's so pitch perfect. Oh my God, that ending. I really, really love that ending. Have your family members read the book?
So my mum has, my sister and her husband have. My dad is kind of still in the process of reading it. But he has been reading it. And it was funny because when I first got the book, or when I got the deal, I said, oh, my dad's not going to read this. He mostly reads like law books, so he's not going to be having time to read this. And he loves Formula One, and I got him a book on Formula One like 6 years ago. He's not read a single page of that book. So I was like, he's not going to read this. And then he was texting me like, what is going on here? Why is this woman still in the house? Da, 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 da. And I was like, oh, he's reading it.
What was the most honest reaction you got from a family member about in the reading of your book?
Oh, my mum, she sent me a couple of voice notes actually. But she used this Nigerian phrase, and I don't know what it directly translates to, but I think it essentially means she was essentially referring to Temi as almost like a witch, basically. We laugh, and I just love that people have such like visceral, strong reactions to these characters. But it's funny because I thought that she would react to I thought she'd be reacting to the fact that I wrote that somebody did something in a bathroom. But she didn't. She seemed to gloss over that real quick. So I was like, great.
Temi is certainly a divisive character. Um, and I was very the reason why I asked about why how your family reacted is because I was very curious to know how from a Nigerian point of view how they would interpret this book, because I'm sure there are things in it that I don't, not being Nigerian, that I'm missing, but I'm also very wrapped, as I was telling you earlier, in Nigerian culture. It's so fascinating to me. I'm watching a soap opera called Wura now, and it's just so incredibly fabulous and wonderful. And so I was very curious about that. Um, let me ask you some things about you as a writer. What is your process like? Like, how do you go to the page in terms of do you feel intimidated by the blankness staring back at you, or do you just say, here I go, and you just dive into it?
It's a bit of both, and what it depends on is my mood and my level of laziness that day. Because writing this book, I was writing it when I was still working a full-time job. Granted, we were in the pandemic and we were in one of the various lockdowns in 2020, so I would be sitting at my dining table at my parents' place because I was with them for the pandemic. I would close my work laptop, open up my personal laptop, and then go, and just kind of like head to one side, like, what are we going to do today? Are we going to do anything? Are we going to do nothing? Are we going to just like write 2 words and update the tracker? It depends. It's no 2 days are ever the same. And I think the thing that probably the only thing that's constant, I suppose, in my process is that I have ideas about what I want to write in the book when I am nowhere near my laptop. And that is very frustrating because sometimes I can like jot a little idea down on my phone and then I'll come back and look at it and be like, what the heck does that even mean? I don't even know what that says. And I'll be like, I don't know what I was trying to say here, but it did not translate from my mind to the. And it's funny because I think sometimes I visualize what I want to write, but I don't then, if I'm not by my laptop, I can't put it down on the page. But I find I have a lot of ideas whether through observing people when I'm outside, like I'm so nosy on the tube. I just look at other people. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cringe. I need to put that in my book. Or, I was saying at an event the other day about something I might put in the next book about couples who hold hands no matter what. Like you could be coming in the middle of them and it's one small path and they refuse to let go. I'm like, why can't you just let go for 2 seconds? Like it's not going to kill you. Just let go. So kind of observations like that. That is the one constant part of my process. But outside of that, it's dependent on mood and when my deadline is. If I have a close deadline, I will have to just figure it out and sit down on my laptop and say, okay, here we go. You need to put something together. But I think something that I do love doing is writing like full profiles for my characters. I think that's something that I did after when J.K. and Sally were saying, we need to find the husband and Temmie as more fully fledged characters. They need to be a bit more. And so writing like a full profile, thinking about the music they like, or the kind of clothes they wear, or what kind of meal they would order if they were at a fancy restaurant, and how much they've spent on a pair of shoes, like really small stuff like that, that then just kind of dials down into who they are as a person. So I'd probably say that and the thinking of things when I'm never near my laptop is probably the most consistent parts of my process.
You talked about making these observations on the tube. I found when I was writing The Prophets, although writing is a solitary endeavor, I got like these bursts of inspiration while riding the subway, looking at people, having them be around me, just watching, people watching, would inform the way I would think about how my characters move, about how they walk, about how they sit, all of those things. What even what might they look like? I thought about all of those things being immersed in that environment. Also, I find that a lot of the writing process for me involves thinking about the writing process. So I'm thinking about it almost as much as I'm at the computer typing it out. So what feels like laziness sometimes, like or avoidance, is really me working things out in my head about how they should persist and how they should show up on the page. So it's really interesting that you also go when you sit down to look, because the thinking is as much a part of the process as the physical part of it.
Yeah.
Who is the writer, living or dead, that you'd most like to have a conversation with?
Ooh, that's such a great question. I've already spoken to you. Who is? That's a really good question. I'm gonna be a little bit cliche and say Chinua Achebe, who wrote Things Fall Apart, because that book is always present in my mind. It's everything. It's a love story. It's a tragedy. It's a story about tradition. It's a story about war. It's a story about colonialism. It's a story. It's a story about everything, and he does it in such a short, sharp way. And you don't forget that book after you've read it. And there's a reason that people recommend books like this is a classic, and you're like, yeah. That one is genuinely like it will live forever. I would love to talk to him about how on earth he did that. And also, I'd love to know if he knows how much that book means to people, because I'm sure, it became a classic while he was still alive. But I don't know if I wonder. I just would love to know if he knows, and maybe even it would be less me asking him questions, just me telling him, like, do you know how incredible your work is and what it means to so many people, and how inspirational you are, and just how fantastic your storytelling ability is, and how it's influenced so many people. Um, because I think that's the sad thing, I think, sometimes about a lot of writers. While I know he was definitely appreciated while he was alive, I just think sometimes a lot of what happens is we like writers necessarily, when they're around, and it's when they're dead, we're like, oh, wait, actually, that was really, 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 really good. And I would love to be able to just give him his flowers and say, even now, like through everything, people are still reading this and still discovering what a phenomenal story it is.
I feel lucky to have been alive while he was alive. That book, I could not have written The Prophets without things fall apart. That book, I will never look at a missionary on a bicycle in the same way ever again. I will never approach writing in the same way ever again, because like you said, he was able to accomplish so much in so short of a span with such concise language. And in many ways that the book was also sort of a feminist critique of culture, where Ankanko, the lead character, knows that his daughter is the most talented child, the most skillful child, the most qualified child, and he's still trying to make this other child the successor. But he really, really wants his daughter to be that, but the society did not allow for. It's just, that book is so good in so many ways. It is probably one of the best novels ever written.
Yep.
So I'm so glad you picked Chinua Achebe. Bow down to him. What was the last book you read that was so good that you wanted to throw it across the room?
I just finished reading Trust by Hernan Diaz. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And every time, it was so stupid. Like, I make fun of people for reading whilst walking. I'm like, you don't look cool. You look like you're going to walk into a pole. But I was doing that. I was holding the book. I was literally right at the end. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And the thing is, I loosely read the blurb and I was like, rich people, cool, gonna love this one. And then I got into it, and he writes like a very few people I think are able to write in this way. And it's like you're sitting by a fire and being told a story. And that book was all of that. And I remember finishing it and I was like, what do I do now? What do I do with myself? Like, what do I do with the rest of my day, the rest of my week? The story within a story within a story within a story, like the Russian doll nesting thing, it was just brilliant. And it's funny because in a way, you were being told the same story 4 times from different angles. And a lot of people could have gotten very bored of that. But the way that he does it is just sensational. And I just remember thinking, like, oh, but sometimes you have those writers that make you want to write better. You're like, I need to be even a little bit closer to how good this is. That's what that book made me feel. And I just bought it, and it wasn't cheap, but my best friend was here and she's like, oh, what's this? And I was like, you should take that book. Take it, because it's so good. She was like, what, to keep? And I was like, yeah, to keep, because I know you're going to ruin the book if you give it back to me. So just keep it, but read it. And she's a very fast reader, so I know she'll read it quickly. But yeah, if not for my respect of books, I would have thrown it across the room or across the street, because I was on the street when I finished it. But it was just, yeah, that book was incredible. I don't even know, how you come up with that, because it's worlds within worlds and all like different characters, but little details being changed here and there. I just, yeah, I don't know how he did that, but it was amazing.
And it won the Pulitzer.
Yeah.
It won the Pulitzer Prize. It is a book that's on my list, and now that you gave it this wonderful endorsement, I'm definitely going to move it up on my list to read, because I love to encounter literature that makes you want to be a better writer. I love to encounter that, so I will definitely read it. Have you yet encountered anyone in public reading your book?
Oh, no, not yet. But I've had some people take pictures of people reading my book. One was on a flight. One and then I think I had 2 on the train, although one of them was my cousin. So a friend of mine took a picture of someone, was like, oh my gosh, this person reading a book. Then my cousin arrived at my house and I was like, this picture looks familiar. I was like, I think my friend took a picture of me on the tube. But no, not yet. I'm worried about what I want to do because if I see them, I know I want to take a picture, but I also don't want to invade someone's privacy like that. And just take a picture of them. I'm just gonna have to take like a mental snapshot. Um, and then maybe as I get off the tube, a really quick fly picture.
I have not either seen anyone in public reading my book, but Clint Smith, how the word is passed. He wrote How the Word is Passed. He recently took a picture of someone in Washington D.C. on the train reading my book, and I was like,
Oh,
oh my God, someone in public reading the prophets. That's amazing.
and I bet they were engrossed and enraptured like I was because yeah, it's just
You're
incredible.
you're too kind. Here's another tough question. Name a song that made you a better writer.
Oh my gosh. The Succession theme tune, honestly,
Really?
because it just the peaks and the I don't know, I don't even know how to explain it, but I love classical music. And I loved his scores for If Beale Street Could Talk and Moonlight. Especially Little's theme in Moonlight was just gorgeous. And so when I had the opening theme Succession, I was like, oh, this is good. And then I realized it was him and I was like, this is why it's good. But I think there's something about it's probably two songs actually. It's probably this song and then an amalgamation of all the different songs I have on my writing playlist, which is super. Okay, let me not call them basic because people are really big fans of these people. But there's this group called Jungle. And there's Tame Impala and then Karangbin. I just have all their albums together in one playlist, and because I don't need to listen to what they're saying, it just kind of passes through me. And I've heard it before, so it just passes through, and then I'm just it just allows me to concentrate. But I think the drama of Succession was like, yes, let's dig some drama into this. And that was before I think I put together that whole playlist. But yeah, that song, the theme is full high drama and ridiculousness. It kind of reminds me of a chandelier. I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's something about the opulence of it just gives me chandelier, and I love that.
Did you see the finale of
Yeah.
Succession?
Yeah.
You know, I actually guessed that ending from like many episodes ahead. I Can we spoil? Are we allowed to
People
spoil
have
now?
seen it by now, and if they haven't, that's not our problem.
Because I feel like the premise of that show is to show us that rich people actually aren't exceptional.
Mm.
They are not smart or intelligent, harder working than anybody else.
Yeah.
They're just luckier.
Mm.
They're
Or
just
unluckier.
ruthless, or unluckier and more ruthless. They're willing
Mm.
to do whatever it takes. They're willing to um, dehumanize themselves in the pursuit of their goals.
Yeah.
So I figured they're gonna bungle it. They're gonna bungle it. They're gonna make fools of themselves because they think they're smarter than they actually are.
Mm.
And that is exactly what happened.
Honestly, I it's annoying because I got swept in every time. And that whole scene in the kitchen where they were all happy and hunky dory, I was like, this feels like it's not going to last, but I really hope it lasts. And I knew it wasn't going to, but I really hoped it did. And then when they were having that horrific argument in the meeting room, I was so embarrassed. I couldn't even look at the screen. I was covering my eyes. I was so embarrassed. So I can't do this anymore. You guys are so embarrassing. But you know what? I'm gonna miss the show, but I'm so glad I don't have to listen to them stutter every 5 seconds because they weren't stuttering like they had an actual stutter. They were just stuttering because they had nothing intelligent to say.
No, that's
I'm
my
relieved.
husband. My husband and I would talk about that all the time. How they could not complete a sentence because they were both not smart enough to, and also um, didn't really have anything of value to say.
Yeah,
And they wanted to have their voice heard even though they had nothing to say.
yeah,
Um, Really great show, and it
yeah,
really makes me think about wealth and rich people in a completely different way.
yeah.
Uh, Very, very interesting.
Mm.
Um, what was the last movie you saw that you felt was done right?
Ah.
Oh,
Tar, and I felt bad as a person of color because I thought I did love Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I saw Tar, and also I think I did Everything Everywhere All at Once dirty by not seeing it in the cinema. I was told multiple times to go and see it in the cinema, but I've only just become a person who goes to the cinema by herself. And so at that point, I wasn't ready to go. So I waited until it was on Disney Plus, I think. But then I went to see Tar. I think that film is sensational.
Kate
I
Blanchett
think that,
is extraordinary.
yeah, I think that Kate Blanchett is one of the most like insane performers. I think is, and this is not to pit person against person, but I know that we talk a lot about Meryl Streep and how amazing she is. But I think the more I look back into like Kate Blanchett's filmography, I just think she just nails it every single time. Even when she's playing like the evil stepmother in Cinderella, like she's just fantastic every time. Yeah, that film was amazing to me. It felt, I'm not surprised that loads of critics then came out and were like, who was the real Lydia Tarr? And then people were like, no, she's not a real person, because she just felt so real. And the ending of that film I thought was perfection. I was like almost crying with laughter at the end of that film.
That
Excellent.
that was truly an extraordinary film,
Yeah.
and timely, very, very timely.
Yeah.
Um, I want to remind our viewers that if anybody has any questions for Ore or myself, please feel free to ask them in the chat, and we will be more than happy to answer them. I already know the answer to this question. I was going to ask you what your favorite TV show was, but was it Succession?
Oh, well, okay. Now, my favorite TV show of all time is The West Wing,
So
which,
good show.
yeah. To dial it down even more, my favorite season of a TV show ever was the first season of The Newsroom, which was also written by the same person. So yeah, I just think those two are amazing. But Succession is also way up there, as is The Wire, even though that film was deeply stressful, and that TV show was deeply stressful. Because TV shows where they get you to root for evil people are just so much fun. And also the second season of The White Lotus, which was just perfect TV, I would have to say, pretty much perfect TV. Yeah, I think all of those are incredible. I love like political TV shows, and I also love TV shows that make you hate people, but like in an enjoyable way. I couldn't enjoy the first season of The White Lotus because I hated them so much I didn't actually want to see them. But with this show, with this season, I loved to hate them, and I was curious to see how it was all going to end, and it was 10 out of 10.
The Wire is one of the most extraordinary TV shows that I've ever seen. If you grew up in a particular neighborhood in the United States, that show punches you in the chest in so many ways. I think Michael K. Williams's character Omar is one of the most revolutionary characters I've ever seen on television. So complex. But I think my favorite show of all time is this really small show that aired on Oprah Winfrey's network called David Makes Man.
Ooh.
It was the first season. I didn't enjoy the second season as much as the first season, but the first season is it's just, I've never seen TV like that before. It was transformative. It was extraordinary. The characters were also relatable and lovable and dimensional. One of the greatest shows of all time, I think. We're getting some questions from the
Okay.
audience. A viewer asks, there is so much irreverent humor in this book. Do you consider yourself a humor writer?
Ooh. I'm going to say no, so that if and when I am to other people, it's proved that I am rather than that I'm not. And I think it's hard because I think I love to infuse a bit of humor into into writing because I just think that's fun. But I know that if it's forced, it doesn't work, and it only happens sort of naturally. And I think the thing that works about this book is that I infused a lot of the humor that my friends and I have in the way that we talk and things like that. And I think that just really helped. Like when we talk through cultural references, that's why there's a reference to the Kardashians in there, like kind of stuff like that. I find really funny. So I was like, oh, I have to put a bit of that in there. But I'm going to say no so that someone else can say yes.
What is your favorite comfort food?
Ooh.
And who makes the
If,
best jollof?
Nigerians, obviously. That's not even a question. That's not even a question. It's a statement. Nigerians, comma, obviously. Favorite comfort food. That's tricky because it's the one I eat the most frequently when I want to eat something and I don't want to go to the shop and buy a snack is cereal. Like I love eating cereal. But if I had access to it, and it didn't make the whole flat smell, I would probably have plantain a lot more often because it's just so delicious.
I love
Um,
plantain.
and especially if you have it with like a nice spicy stew, perfect, absolutely perfect. But where I live, there's not a lot of it around to buy. And when you cook it, you and your clothes and all your items will smell of it for the next 3 days. So I don't make it very often.
Um, a question from a viewer. Would you want to have this book produced as a play?
Yes, I think that would be really fascinating, especially to see how they or we would be able to infuse the present moments with also the flashbacks to the past, um, and to see how that would work. I also think it would be beautifully tense on stage, which I would really enjoy. And I wouldn't be freaked out by it because I would know what's going to happen, so it's okay. But like, I struggle sometimes watching really tense things because I get like actually stressed. Like I couldn't finish that Netflix show Beef because I was too stressed. I'm a little bit pathetic in that sense. But no, I would love to see it as a play. I think that could be really fascinating. And I don't know if have you ever seen Euphoria? It's a very dark show, but
So one episode.
okay, yeah, it's a lot.
I couldn't watch it. It was very triggering.
Yeah, it's a lot. But there's one episode in the second season where there's a play in the school and they have this sort of rotating thing that has like, different scenes. And I think something like that could look very cool. I don't know how much that would cost. But I think it could be really cool on stage.
Relatedly, do you have a dream cast for an adaptation of The Three of Us?
I know who I would love to play the husband, but I don't know who I would love to play the wife or the best friend. And the reason for that is because I feel like Temmie is such a potent character. It's to capture her energy. I feel like someone has to get it exactly right. But that's why there are casting directors because they're amazing at that stuff. And the wife, I feel like you need someone who's gloriously like one note, but has a mischievousness to them. But I would love. I think that Damson Idris could play a very good husband. I think he'd be very good.
My husband would love you because that's his secret crush. That man is so handsome, it's distracting. Sorry, Damson. Do you have a favorite superhero? Speaking of Damson,
It's gonna sound so anti-black, but it's Iron Man. I really liked Iron Man.
you have this thing with wealthy people.
But
Because
to be fair, T'Challa was also very wealthy. So he's like second. But I think because I've watched more Iron Man films, and I kind of as I was growing up, I was watching those films. Um, that's and also he's just mischievous. He's a little bit terrible. And I think because he was the antithesis to Captain America with his like perfection, which really irritated me. So I really liked that Iron Man was a bit mischievous. Yeah, he's probably my favorite.
we have a question from Black Girl Tech who says, Robert, can you talk more about the idea of innocence as you saw it play out in the novel?
Mhm.
Very interesting question. So, how I saw it play out in the novel was that each of these characters, from their own point of view, was either the victim that needed to have their point of view sort of confirmed, understood, validated, um, or they were the innocent one of this triad in which they were the one that was being sort of put upon and were not being seen as valid or what have you. But what you did so skillfully in this, both in sort of the ways they unintentionally reveal themselves and the ways they see each other, was reveal that innocence is a flawed construct, that there is light in the dark and dark in the light, that none of us are actually innocent, but we are all, of course, the heroes in our own story, but we are also the villain in someone else's. The way you weaved that together such that it became complex, which is to say, real life, was extraordinary. That was the mark of maturity, yes, but also brilliance. That
Thank you.
is what Ore does, and that's why y'all have to buy The Three of Us. Any ideas for another novel? Perhaps a
Oh, I do. I won't give it all away, but it's about relationships again, and messy people, because I love mess when it's not mine. So yeah, it's another one that kind of covers relationships. And it asks another what would you do question actually, but a slightly more complex what would you do question.
Okay. This question is from our editor, our beloved Sally Kim.
Oh.
Sally asks, this story isn't squarely or only about cultural expectations, but they do infuse every line in this book. Were you conscious of this while writing?
Yes, definitely. I definitely wanted to infuse my Nigerian culture, but also as a British Nigerian person, that culture in there as well. And it was really important to me, that visibility. And I think also I have to commend the people who've gone before me, like other like Black British Nigerian writers, because particularly people like Bolu Babalola, who she wrote this lovely collection, Love in Color, and she's got the book out, Honey and Spice. She's also been able to do that, and other writers even before her as well. And I think that gave me the freedom to think, okay, this will work. And even if people don't get it, they can look it up if they don't understand it, you know. But it was important to me to have that because that's part of my experience and that's part of what I know. And putting part of myself, a really important part of myself, into that book, that really meant a lot to me. And I know that my mum, even seeing things like me writing about egusi stew and like jollof, she was like, oh, that's so nice to see that in a book. And I was like, yeah, it's true. So yeah, it was really lovely.
We're running close to the end of this, and I still have like quite a few questions I want to ask you. So I'm gonna ask this one last question. Do you have a place that you consider your safe space?
Ooh, yes. And it's going to sound, actually, well, maybe there are two places. One is my bed. um, I think the knowledge, and I think what helps is I make my bed every day. When I was a child, my mum had to beg me to make my bed after I got out of it. But now, the moment I get up, I make my bed because it just gives me peace of mind. And
Mm.
also, my desk kind of like faces the bed. So if I'm looking at my bed and it's messy, that's just going to mess with my mind. Um, and just like also knowing when you come back from the end of a long day or something like that, and you're like, that bed is made and it looks fresh, like no one's ever slept in it before, and I'm going to get in it and it's going to be glorious. And this is just my space and my time for me, particularly in the evenings, just before I go to bed, and in the mornings. Those moments that are just for me when I'm there are perfect. And the other will sound a little soppy, but in my mother's arms, like when she gives me a hug.
Oh,
Um, she has the warmest hug. She also just has a beautiful warm heart, and whenever she goes to give me a hug, you know, it just feels like everything's right in the world. So yeah, those would be probably my two safe spaces.
Ore, this has been so fabulous. I feel privileged to be able to speak to you about your work. I am wishing for you a very long and prosperous career because you are such a wonderful writer. Um, Gosh, I love this book. Everyone, go to your local bookseller and buy The Three of Us. You will not regret it. You will be laughing. You will be crying. You will be gasping. You will be gagging because this book is so, 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 so good. Ore, thank you so much for giving us this work.
Thank you so much for doing this and for being also you so supportive of so many writers, in particular like Black writers. You are such a support, and your newsletter, I love reading your newsletters. It's full of support for new writers, old writers, everything in between. And we are very grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. This was such a fabulous conversation. I wish we had another hour for you to ask all your questions, Robert. You just did such an amazing job at bringing out Ore's who she is, and I feel like I know you so much better now, Ore. And if I hadn't read the book, I'd want to for sure read it now. But it's incredible, and I can't wait to see what you do next. And I want to, as Robert said, encourage you all to go out and buy the book. Of course, we'd love it if you purchase it from Book Passage. You can order it online. You can call us and have it shipped to you, or you can come into our store and get it. But however you do it, please read this book. And thank you again, both of you, for this delightful conversation.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us.
You're welcome. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks.